Hey, everybody. We'll go ahead and call our work session to order. Apologies for the slightly delayed start. Today is Tuesday, June the 18th, and we'll be beginning our Wake County Board of Education work session. We do have 5 members present, so we do have a quorum. We have a couple other members that are delayed and might be arriving during the presentation or later during the meeting. We have changed our agenda slightly to move up the public engagement plan for the 25-26 WCPSS school enrollment plan to be first on the agenda. And so presenting, we will have Ms. Susan Pulliam, Mr. Glenn Carosa. Thank you all.
Thank you. Chair Hegarty, I don't see Ms. Johnson-Hostler yet, members of the board, Superintendent Taylor. This is a tradition we started last year, so it's a very young tradition, to come check in with you this time of year to give you an update on what we've learned so far from all of our public engagement efforts throughout the spring and early summer. So we're here today to share the thoughts and ideas that we've already captured from the public through these sessions, as well as to give a quick touch point on what to expect next from a public engagement standpoint, and then of course to have an opportunity to seek additional thoughts and feedback from all of you as we continue our work in developing the next enrollment plan. As a reminder, this work is aligned with our strategic plan, specifically in the family and community engagement area for AIMS 6 and 12. Today's work is really closely aligned with this work. The work in developing the enrollment plan is then more closely aligned with our operational effectiveness AIMS 14 and 19. Not to belabor the point, but you know I always like to remind us that this work is anchored in board policy, specifically board policy 4150, that asks us to look at these 4 pillars when making assignment recommendations. And so we do evaluate any public feedback that we receive, comments, suggestions, ideas in light of these 4 pillars. And again, as a reminder, most of this is just what we make sure we keep that story continuum going, is that these 4 pillars do have very specific definitions in your current board policy as listed here. We would encourage anyone who's interested in reading these in full detail to visit your website and your board policy section. Now, on to today's specific goals. We want to talk about our public engagement progress. We'll spend a little bit of time reminding you what the elements of the public engagement plan are. We'll talk about an overview of what was shared with families and community members during our recent sessions. And then more importantly, we will tell you what we've learned and heard so far, and then where we're going from this point forward. We won't belabor any points about the specific enrollment plan recommendations today. This is really just an opportunity for you to know what the community is saying as we prepare the plan. So as far as the progress goes, of course, we want to point you again to our website for this effort. As I told you in March, this is a new website. It launched in March as we were preparing for our first touch point with you for this enrollment plan. I'm pleased to say we've had over 11,000 views of this as of today. So in just a short order, families are finding themselves directed to this resource and accessing this resource. In addition, we've been sharing this resource as far and wide as we can with our local municipal partners, so that as they get questions from their citizenry, they can also direct families to this resource. We'll do a quick review of the plan elements. I just want to remind you, when we talked to you in March, we said what we heard from families is that they would like a better understanding of the assignment planning process. We heard from families that they wanted to better understand how their feedback impacts the planning process. And we also heard from families that they wanted more and different opportunities to engage in discussions. Again, as a review, we shared with you that we were updating our website format. That's sort of a check and in progress, right? So it's done, the website has been developed, and we just continue to update it as more information is available. We've also included that new section that highlights those opportunities for participants to engage in different sessions. We're in a bit of a lull. We've had a really big time of having a lot of events throughout the spring. In the summer, it's a bit of a quiet period for us where we're really reflecting on what we've heard, and then it'll all kickstart again when we release the initial draft in September. We're starting to use our community messages a little bit differently and timing them and using the frequency of them a little bit differently to make sure families are well aware. And of course, we're continuing to leverage our relationships with community partners wherever possible to help get the word out. And so those are all ongoing activities. The focus groups, we are now able to take volunteers to participate in focus groups straight through the main website, so you don't have to have attended a particular session to volunteer for this service, and that is still open on our website and families can still do that. We have more asynchronous offerings. We've already posted some recordings of some of our previous sessions, so families who couldn't attend can watch those recordings for our Spanish language version of that same recording. It should be up sometime this week. I just got a final proof earlier today. And we're going to add that open in-house event in September that we haven't had in quite some time, to have an in-person event in the fall. So that's still yet to come. Another thing that we've done is prepared some graphic materials. We've partnered with our communications department to better help families and community members understand the planning process. So you'll start to see this graphic more and more from not only my office, but other partners in the school choice planning and assignment department. So we're step 4 at this stage in this process. As I reminded you, in the past, we start with the enrollment forecast. We go and talk about how that affects crowding and what we know about crowding in the coming years. And then we talk about our known entities in the capital improvement plan, renovations, new construction. Then we're ready for this step in the plan. This is really a cyclical process that continuously is on repeat. Candidly, step 6 for last year's plan is happening now, right? So it never really stops. It's constantly in motion. But as we talk about the public engagement for capturing thoughts, it's really specifically at this time what I'm talking to you about is that those thoughts and ideas that are going to help us develop the enrollment plan. We reviewed steps 1, 2, and 3 with you in May, and then we'll come back to you for steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 really kick off September, October, November, that time frame. So that's what we're looking forward to. So as of today, we've already completed our regional face-to-face information sessions related to the future schools that will be opening in the next couple of years. And we also hosted a couple of virtual information sessions. That was an add-on based on feedback from previous years. You will notice that in the summer, we're starting to gear up and get prepared for our focus groups. We finally had a chance to cull through all of the things that we've heard and realize, ooh, we need a little bit more information on this, or we want to dig deeper into that, or no one actually talked about this, and that's surprising to us. Let's see what we can get from some focus groups to help us better understand those ideas. And then in the fall, later on in this year, we'll bring you the specific recommendations after we've had a chance to review all of that work. As far as resources go, the individualized thought exchanges that we use for the new schools have all closed. They were open through May 24th. You're going to see a readout of those results today. We also had a general thought exchange, and I do want to pause here. We did something a little bit different, responding to feedback from community members last year. If I live in the eastern part of the county, and I'm looking at a thought that was written by someone in the western part of the county, sometimes I feel a little awkward giving that a rating because I'm not sure that I know their experience that well, and whether or not what they're talking about in terms of a commute pattern or something else is really that critical. So we used a new feature that's been added into Thought Exchange called participant groups. So as families entered into the general thought exchange, they were asked to self-identify where do you live in the district, and they could pick. And we gave them some municipal names too to kind of help them find themselves. So maybe I'm from Wendell, or maybe I'm from Apex, or maybe I'm from Roseville. And once I selected that, then I would only have to rate thoughts for people in my area. So and I should only really be looking at things that I probably have some perspective on. So we think that's a plus so that families will be able to do that. But yet I still on the backside can collect all of the thoughts and analyze them as a district so I can give you both looks. We also updated our assignment planning website. If anyone in this room has been viewing it, hopefully you'll notice that about every week or 2 weeks there's something new. There's a new hyperlink, there's an updated piece of information, there's a new video. So hopefully that will be something that families will trend to and continue to see, that if they continue to revisit it, they will see updated information. Throughout the summer, we'll continue to update the website as more information is available, and of course, we'll start using those community messages to get people ready to participate in our fall processes. We'll talk more about what's going to happen in the fall when we get there, but do be prepared for virtual information sessions, an in-person session, and of course, as a board, you'll need to define a time for a public hearing. I just want to make sure you have an idea of what we shared with families. It's very similar to what I shared with you in May, so I'm not going to go too slowly through it. But we presented that these were the goals for the session. For families coming to our sessions, we wanted them to have a better understanding of the assignment planning process. We wanted them to be able to review all of the projections and enrollment growth information that we have in addition to what we know about our capital improvement plan. And then most importantly, we wanted to gather from our participants their thoughts and ideas that we need to be thinking about as we're developing the enrollment plan. When we had sessions at specific to new school openings, we kind of teased that question more, refined it, I should say, and asked them about impacts to new schools. But in general, that third bullet was really where we were spending most of our time, which was gathering that feedback. Quick reminder, we shared this information with them that, we start with the forecast, and that lets us then take that information and put it into a district-wide map so that we can start to better understand within the county where that growth is coming. All of this is a review from what I shared with you in May. The next thing we shared with families was information about projected crowding. You've seen all of these maps before, just to give them an idea of where we think we're going to have the most crowded schools going into next year, and also where we have some available space going into next year. And then we also, of course, showed them where we thought the new construction was going to be based on the current adopted capital improvement plan, and reminded them that the 4 schools that are projected to open for 25-26 are Bowling Road Elementary, Pleasant Plains Elementary, Rex Road Elementary, and Felton Grove High School. I will say this slide changed from session to session as updates were made to the capital improvement plan. There were a couple of schools on this list that were originally projected to open in 25-26 that have had shifted dates. But this is where we have landed as of today. The asterisk still remains due to market volatility and other types of scheduling changes. It is always possible for a project to have a change in its completion date, but for right now, we're moving full steam ahead planning for these 4 schools. And then we said, okay, so now this is where we are in the process for us. As an Office of Student Assignment, we're really trying to get your thoughts and ideas as we develop our next plan. We'll come back to you with 5 and 6 later on. So what did we hear? This is really why we're here today, is what did we hear, what did we learn as we went around the district and had these sessions. I'll start with a by the numbers look. We did see an increase of 75% in participation at these events. I owe that largely to 2 factors. One, we slightly altered our communication strategy to get families messages 2 weeks in advance with a 1-week reminder. That seemed to really help increase our participation. And we added those 2 general sessions that you see listed at the bottom that were hosted virtually. So by giving families multiple ways to access the information and participate, we think both of those tactics really helped us to increase our participation. So we had 333 participants across all of the different sessions. And during those sessions, again, we asked them these very important questions. What should the district leadership take into consideration and be aware of, not only when we're opening a new school in your community, but also while we're managing enrollment growth and school crowding throughout the district? What you'll see on these next 2 slides, 29 and 30, are 10 key takeaways across all 6 of the in-person sessions. So these are really specific to the families that were responding to questions about opening a new school. I can say that traffic and congestion concerns in one way, one shape, one form, one way or another came up in almost every single session. Maybe it was carpool. Maybe it was how I get from my neighborhood to the school. Maybe it was what's going on with construction projects in my municipality. Maybe it's this school's going to be co-located with a community center. What type of traffic patterns are we going to be prepared to support as different types of people are trying to access the same site? So it kind of ran the gamut. Calendar alignment really came up mostly in our K-8s, or our kindergarten or elementary sessions, but the comments here were very similar to what we've heard over the last couple of years. In general, families do prefer a K-8 alignment, but they're starting to understand that 6-12 might be more practical as a district. So we're still in an interesting spot there. Stability and cohort continuity. Again, this one was really strong last year. This is a continuing theme year over year. Where can we as families have individual stability while we're dealing with the opening of new schools? And that's a hard one to manage. How do you open a school with students but also give families some level of stability? So that's a puzzle that we continue to try to solve each year. So those 3 were really across all of them. Proximity and walkability came up most frequently in the elementary school discussions. Impact of reassignment on families really did come up in all of them, but in different ways and different flavors. Maybe it's what happens to my friend group, what happens to my course access. You'll see some very specific on the next slide about quality of education and resources and the equity of academic programs. I will say quality of education and resources was that conversation that we're having as a public. Families recognize that some schools today have vacant, well, not today, some of our year-rounds maybe, might still continue to have vacancies for this current school year. How are we going to grow our staff by a sufficient number of employees to be able to open these schools in a year or so? So just continuing to share information about what our human resources department is doing from a recruitment and retainment standing, but those are questions and concerns that are coming up. The equity of academic programs had a broad scope, but the idea here was what my student is learning and has access to here, will they be able to do that in a new school setting? This could be courses, individual unique courses. It could be extracurricular activities. It could be athletic opportunities. I can ride my bike to school today. Will I be able to ride my bike to this other school if I get reassigned? Are they that close to each other? So just anything that had to deal with how can I have that equitable access to an experience, really. A lot of it was about academic programs, but it was also about just my personal experience at the school. Assignment and transportation efficiency it was a common thread throughout all of them. I will say that particularly the younger families were concerned about students on long bus rides, but in general, that came up quite regularly. The consideration of the existing community bonds, this was a slightly different approach to the cohort continuity thread, but it's the same kind of idea that if we're a community group that's been going to school together, we'd at least like to stay together. One example was we recognize, I had a parent say, we get that we're a really large subdivision and that we probably can't all fit in a single elementary school. But could you not break us up into 5 elementary schools? Could you keep it to 2 or 3 so that we have a big group going together so at least our neighborhood has some sense of community at our schools? So that was something that really made sense to me. And then notification and options for families. This is coming up a lot now that we're coming out early and often. Continue to do this. A lot of support, a lot of thanks for coming out early, a lot of desire for even more information early on. And so we're continuing to try to figure out that balance between sharing information that's ready as well as timely. As far as the thought exchange goes, again, as a reminder, this is the tool that we use to have community discussion in an asynchronous fashion. It allows for anonymity. It allows for families or participants to self-select what thoughts they want to post, and then they can, from there, randomly get an assortment of thoughts to rank. As I mentioned, for the general session thought exchanges, those are the ones at the bottom. Those, they were able to identify their participant area first. That way, when they started rating thoughts, they were only rating those that were posted by people that live in the same area that they lived in. As far as the others, they were individual thought exchanges for each one of those school locations, so we could get a really unique flavor for what is it that's important in this community for this school as this school is preparing to open. Overall, we had 3,311 participants that posted 2,330 thoughts, which, as you can see, is a tremendous increase in participation over last year's spring sessions, an increase of 367% in total participants, and an increase in 275% in thoughts as compared to the same processes last year. Again, I owe a lot of that to those early and regular communications and reminders, as well as having that general session available for families who maybe aren't impacted by a new school, but are curious and interested in having conversations about our assignment planning process. So we will continue to leverage this type of process to be able to get more and more information. Now, the numbers don't matter as much as the thoughts. What you'll see in the next few slides, I'll let you look at these a little bit on your own time, but I want to just talk through what these share. So as a reminder, when you participate in a thought exchange, you're going to go in and you're going to put a thought. I call it a virtual sticky note. You have the option to expand on it. You can put in as many individual thoughts in response to that core question. Again, the core question is, what should district leadership think about and take into consideration when developing an assignment plan and managing enrollment growth in your area and opening a new school in your area? So they're wide and broad. Some are, we love it, we live close to the school, we're excited about it, can you just tell me what the mascot is? So a lot of people will participate by posting questions. Others will post an individual thought or an idea. Some will share the thing that is most passionate to them, and really, you can see that in the language that they use to say, this is really important to my family. And then as people are rating those thoughts, they'll rate them from a 1 to a 5. The 1 is, I don't agree with this, or this doesn't make sense to me, or anything along the lines of, I don't know that I have a lot of support for this type of thought. And a 5 would be, oh, I probably should have written that myself. Did you read my mind? Or, oh, I never thought of that, but that's amazing. I'm glad somebody put that in there. So what we're seeing here for Bowling Road is the top-rated sort of set of thoughts were around the concept of staff and leadership with the 4.3. So a lot of energy around making sure we have high-quality staff, high-quality leadership that are well-prepared to open the school and hit the ground running with a really great program. The next two are both rated at 4.2, which were school infrastructure and school location. And so this is just about, and what we're going to do, just so you know, we're going to put an interactive version of these reports on the website so families can go and click that bar, open it up, and see all the thoughts that are in here. And you'll be able to do the same as well, and we'll send you an update as soon as that's, I think we're trying to do that by the end of the week. Yeah, by the end of this week, we'll have those interactive reports. So literally, you can click on the bar, and it'll take you to all of the thoughts that were shared. So this gives you an idea. As you go on to the others, Felton Grove High School, these are in alphabetical order. The highest sort of theme was transportation and commute, and I will say there's some very serious concern about the roadway construction in this area, about some plants that are being constructed that are adding commuter traffic to the region, about where the different municipalities are and their transportation plans, because there's quite a few projects that are underway right now to widen and expand roadways in the area. And then there's other areas where maybe it's not there. So lots and lots of conversation. At the high school level, you also tend to get a slightly different flavor, which is we're thinking about our student drivers or our future student drivers. So that lens gets put on this as well. Not only is this a potential commuting challenge for a normal driver, but for a brand new or a young driver. So lots of energy and thoughts around what are we thinking and what do we know about how to help them navigate that. Diversity and inclusion came up with a tie with student stability, and here it was just students feeling a sense of belonging at their school, students feeling welcome at their school, having a diverse staff. So it was an interesting, rich set of thoughts there. What I need to remind everyone with these results is they give us the star ratings, not the total quantity. So if I organize these differently by total quantity, I promise you transportation and commute would be like off the chart for this one. And diversity and inclusion might only be in the 20s. But by ratings and by support for the comments, it's just as equally important, even though there weren't quite so many thoughts. So it lets us look at it in both ways. But we get it very clearly. We're very concerned about transportation and commute patterns in this area, and we need to make sure that we're thinking that through with any assignment recommendations. Hilltop Meadmore is another elementary school. This one is not projected to open until 26-27, but I just presented them in alphabetical order. You can see here that top of mind was traffic and safety. Again, this is a site that's going to be co-located with a community center, so there was a lot of energy around that idea that there might be joint use of this facility, different types of traffic flowing at the same time, neighborhoods that might be impacted by different types of traffic. When we look at Parkside Middle School, again, this one's currently projected to open in 26-27. Top of mind is proximity and transportation, and then of equal weight are the others. So this one was perhaps the most balanced, yet nothing really got over a 4. So we've got a community that still, they know it's not coming just yet. They're still kind of wrapping their head around what's important as we open this school. And candidly, this is the largest geographic area that we invited, because of the nature of the schools in this region. We have Austin Ridge and Mills Park and Salem and West Cary and a number of middle schools in this area that could potentially be impacted because of the location of this school. So it's a much larger group. You'll even notice by participants, this was our most highly participated thought exchange, even more so than Felton Grove, because the area is just so large. It covers such a large area. Pleasant Plains Elementary is currently scheduled to open in 25-26. Community cohesion, proximity and transportation, and student stability were all top of mind for this group of participants. And then for Rex Road, proximity and transportation, student stability. So you'll, again, I told you those come up pretty regularly in all of the concerns and conversations. So I'll let you look at those at your leisure, because I know that's a lot of data to take in. The general session, I went ahead and just shared with you the overall, the interactive report will allow you to go in by participant group and see, well, what are the families that say that they identify as Apex feel like, or what are the families that say that they're from, that identify as Rose Bowl or something like that. You can see those. But here, as a whole group of all the people who participated in the general session, this one was really focused on how should we help manage growth in the district. Logistics and proximity, student stability, community and neighborhood all came up top of mind, which really aren't drastically different from areas that are having new schools opening. So families in general in the district are really looking for stability of assignment wherever possible. They have a sense of community and neighborhood that they at least want to be able to have their community or their neighborhood go to the same schools if at all possible. And then, of course, everyone is thinking about some form of transportation, proximity, logistics. It's coming up in every conversation. So what does this mean for our work? What this means for our work is that we start to really think about how we can take this information, this perspective, this lived experience, and put it to work in our enrollment plan. Where can we adapt and adjust the enrollment plan to try to meet as many of these as we can while still being good stewards of taxpayer resources and meeting our operational needs as a district? So first, like I said at the opening, we're going to conduct additional focus groups this summer where we're going to really dig into a few topics. Some ideas were, how do we manage growth when there's no new schools projected? Let's have some deeper, richer conversations in areas where no new schools are coming. What levers can we use to address that when assignment isn't an option to relieve the crowding? Again, having those conversations about calendar alignment. We've openly talked about our middle school capacity is getting pretty solid. So do we need to keep pushing on a K-8 calendar alignment, or is it more use year-round at elementary where we need to, and then try maybe for a more traditional 6-12 path? Let's keep digging and see how that's going to impact families if we have to make those types of decisions. Frequency of changes comes up a lot, so maybe we can keep having deeper conversations. There's just lots of places we can go. Stability rules. This one is almost cookie cutter, the same as last year's bullet, which is where can we provide stability and balance that with our operational needs. We tried some new things last year that I think the community was really in support of, but it has made for some newer schools opening with less students. And so there's some give and take there, and we want to analyze that. At the high school level, by way of example, a lot of energy around, could you just open Felton Grove with 9th grade? And it's like, ooh, that's hard to offer really rich academic programming with only that few students. So there's a lot of conversation around how can we have stability, particularly at the high school level. And then, of course, looking at the feeder pattern concerns. You saw on almost every exchange something about cohort continuity or keeping our students together long term. So how can we take that into consideration when we're making recommendations? Which leaves us to what's next. Right? So today we are here to give you this update. So the next time we'll officially come see you will be in September, and at that time we'll be bringing you the initial draft. So between then and today, we wanted to open up and see if anybody had any questions or comments for discussion or any ideas for us to consider as we get ready to roll up the sleeves and sort of close the door and get to work with our planning partners. But before we do that, just again, my favorite website, 11,000 visits already, maybe it's at 12 after today. We do see a spike after our presentation, so thank you, community, for listening and tuning in. There is an addendum to today's presentation. We just wanted for your edification to be able to have a copy of all the impact maps. What you'll see is that there's 2 maps on each slide. The smaller map on the top left of the slide is what we used last spring to invite families to come and have conversations with us about that particular new school opening. And then the larger map is what we used this spring to identify families that we wanted to invite to have the conversation. In many cases, those maps get smaller and more refined each year so that we're having more refined conversations with families that are more likely to be directly impacted. In other areas, it gets a little larger because we start to realize, ooh, we don't have a solution for crowding or something like that in this area, and we wanted to bring in a larger group to make sure we're having open conversations with communities so that they know that we want your opinion as we're making our plans and moving forward. So with that, I turn it over to Chair Higgery and subject to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pulliam. A wonderful presentation. If board members have not visited the Student Assignment website, I'd encourage you to go and visit. Particularly, I want to give you kudos for the Policy 4150 video. I don't know how you use that, if it's just on the website, if you use that in the community meetings. I think that's essential information anybody who could be affected needs to know. I thought it was really clear and to the point, easy to understand. So, great stuff there. A couple just quick questions. I noticed the number of participants in some of those thought exchanges. In a couple cases, like Piney Plains and Parkside, you had more participants than you have population at some elementary and middle schools. So, just I appreciate you being able to go through all that data and then also being able to sort through it to make sure it's not one person just giving their opinion multiple times. And then you had a term on the Felton Grove data, community cohesion. And I just want, is that the cohort continuity? Is that the community bonds? Which one was that?
The community cohesion was really around, there's a handful of subdivisions in the area that are in the impacts map that are really tight-knit. And so they're trying to say, as a community, we feel one, so can you try to keep us together as much as possible and take our thoughts and ideas into consideration, because we know we're going to be traveling together.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Are there any questions from any board members about the presentation?
No, I just want to say, well done. It's very nice to see the leveled up community engagement that happened. I think it's a great idea to inform families a little early and send out a reminder. This was great information. I enjoyed reading it prior to today. But kudos.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Ms. Mahaffey?
I think for those of us that have been here a while, recognizing that every year this is new information for families that are impacted. And even though we've heard it year after year after year, the fact that it is an iterative process and it changes. So, I mean, to see, we have engagement sessions now, and to see the input for families that's getting put on the front end is really important. And they can see that information was put at the front end if you're looking at those maps. And with all that, this continues to be really difficult for those families that are impacted. And I think balancing those two things is something that I see at the forefront of all of your minds. But when you're in it, you don't always feel that. I appreciate you highlighting, especially at our high school level. I know our elementaries are hard because that's 6 years of your kid's life. But that high school piece, continually asking, okay, do we need a sophomore class? Do we, what does this mean for an early driver? I just want to thank you for highlighting those things that we heard very strongly for the community, because being at that meeting and seeing the sticky notes that were laid out, I'd say most of them, even at that meeting, were based on traffic and the commute and academics for the most part. So, but I appreciate those being highlighted in this process, not changing, but improving year over year.
To piggyback on that, one thing I probably didn't make clear today is the Felton Grove session in particular. It's high school. It's a whole different dynamic. The nature. She talks about the sticky notes. As families came in, we asked them to write a question down on the sticky notes so they wouldn't forget to ask it. That way, if we ran out of time, we still had all the questions. We're so glad we did, because we completely ran out of time. Our academics department, our special education department, all of the other planning partners here were so instrumental in us being able to say, okay, we captured these questions. Help us out. They were amazing and quick to get us responses, and then those are all posted in a very separate and special section for Felton Grove, just because of the nature of the kinds of questions that were being asked that are specific to high school. So hopefully our families that haven't had a chance will go to the website, go to the Felton Grove section, and they'll see a very special set of frequently asked questions just for them based on all of that came in at that session. So I want to thank our partners for that, because they made that possible.
Thank you, Ms. Pulliam. So then with that, we'll thank you for the presentation. We'll look forward to the next steps. And if you saw in the student assignment plan all of those new schools coming online, that is a good intro for our next topic, which will be our joint presentation from the core team. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Joint Facilities Core Team is the collaborative group of staff from Wake County Government and WCPSS Government, and so we have a special guest here. Well, Mark Strickland's always special, but in addition to Mark,
I was going to say, are you talking about Mark?
we welcome Miss Emily Lucas to our work session as well. Hello, Emily.
Okay, got it. Just looking for my partner in crime. But I do want to say, first of all, thank you for having me today. I've been with Wick County since 2016, and I've had some role on the core team since 2017. And it's always exciting to talk about the core team, the work that we have done, the work that we plan to do. For those that are newer, to get a little history lesson, to see why we have come to where we are today.
Sorry, we were getting things ready.
Did you have any introduction?
So we were going to make this presentation some months ago at another meeting. We felt like with many new board members, this was a great opportunity of sharing this with you all today. There's an agenda item later on the consent to re-up or reestablish our core team MOU. This has been going on since 2014. So we saw it as an opportunity to come and share this with you all for some of your newer members to see if you had any questions.
So like I said, I want to start with a little history about the Joint Facilities Core Team. It was established in 2014. And for those of you that don't know, it was established because the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education had such discord and mistrust among each other that they thought the only way that we could move forward with a capital improvement plan was to have each other watching each other. And so I wasn't here then, and I'm probably thankful I wasn't here then and to be a part of that. But since then, we have really continued to evolve the team, what the team does to benefit the students of Wake County and to get to the best possible recommended capital improvement plan that we can do. I think prior to the core team, or just around the time of the core team, there wasn't even a 7-year rolling CIP. So it was very hard to predict what the needs were of the school system and to make sure that the county had the resources available to fund as much of that as they could. You can see the goals here on the what the goals of the interlocal agreement are. They've certainly increased communication, increased collaboration, optimize, again, those resources that we have for the 7-year CIP, and then make sure that we are carrying out the CIP based on the things that you all see that are needed, and we can get the most efficiency out of those funds.
I want to know that in the long career that I've had in the school business, this is a unique team approach. I've never experienced it until I came to Wake County. This is an absolutely great way of conducting business. Emily talked about how this was birthed and the origins of it, but it continues to produce really, really positive results today. And again, not having had this before, I don't know anywhere else, I don't know how people conduct business. The core team's made up of higher level, more executive staff members. Emily's got a number of staff on her team. We've got a number of administration, operations, facility staff that participate as well. These are more senior, high-level people who look at and direct the work of what we do. Although we do have subject matter experts on the team, time to time we bring them in as well as things dictate the discussions that we have to have. Glenn is on the team, but there are often times when he may bring many of his staff in to participate in some of the discussions. There are robust discussions, but there's also alignment once we finish those discussions. And again, I just want to say how thankful I am we have that process here, and it's great to get to work with our county staff on a common goal.
I think it has certainly built a lot of trust. I know Mark will call me, I'll call him, we'll hear something that you all might identify as a priority coming out of one of your meetings, and we think, okay, how do we need to start incorporating that into the CIP in the future? This next slide has a lot of words on it, and I don't really want to read all of them. But these are the 5 things that are listed are sort of the 5 primary things that have been done year after year when it comes to the development of getting a recommended CIP to you all for approval, and then, of course, your funding request to the school system. We certainly look at student enrollment projections every year. I actually thought it was great that you flipped these presentations, because it's not just that we look at the enrollment forecast, it's now we have to look at what areas of the county are increasing or decreasing. Susan, you had a great map on there with little arrows up and down. And we have to understand not just total growth in the system, but growth by grade, where that growth is going, legislative impacts every year. We look at building program and cost model assumptions. We've certainly taken time, I think, over the past couple of years to do a larger focus or deeper focus on facility condition assessments to make sure that we're not just building new schools in the right places, but the schools that you all have are maintained as well as good as possible. Cost model assumptions, of course, those have been volatile over the past few years. That's been something that's like a standing item on our agendas, is just keeping up with all those projects, and particularly the ones that we've had to bid out, or you all have had to bid out in the past couple of years. Understanding non-building capital requirements, again, this is something that has come to the forefront more recently in the event of COVID, the introduction of more technology into classrooms, into schools, understanding your security needs, maximizing where we have life cycle needs that need to be done across the school system. We ultimately use all of these different data sets to build a recommended CIP that goes before you all. And then once that is adopted and the Board of Commissioners has allocated funding, we then, like I mentioned, monitor all of those different components to make sure that we are using that money effectively. I get to talk for a few minutes about some of the great things that we've done over the past really 6 years. The 2018 bond was in November of 2018, but went into effect for the fiscal year 1920 year and then the fiscal year 2021 year. That was a $653 million bond with 67% voter approval. That one had a rather large tax increase, because we had not done a significant building program in quite a while, or a bond in quite a while. And so that included 7 new schools and 11 existing school renovations. And with this bond program, we went to a 2-year funding cycle. So we still do a 7-year plan or outlook to know what we need to be done. But to maximize cash flow efficiency at the county and to get more out of the dollars, we went to 2-year funding cycles. Really technical stuff, but basically we use like a construction period loan. If you think about buying building a new house, we use a short-term loan, and then we really don't take out the long-term debt until that work is done. So that actually gives us more cash flow to give to your projects every year. In 2022 and 2023, we did not do a general obligation bond because we did not need another tax increase. And you can actually see we funded a little bit more without a tax increase for these 2 years. That's because some of the projects from the 2013 bond were getting paid off, so now we had more funds available. We also saw significant revenue growth during this period. So we saw significant revenue growth in sales tax, a portion of which goes specifically to pay debt for the school system. So we were able to leverage those things to get some more projects done. And that bond included 9 new schools and 2 school renovations. And we don't put it on here. It does include the whole slew of things that go along with that. It comes with building refreshes, technology, security, mobile classrooms. So it does include all those things, but normally these are the things that folks would kind of focus on, is what are the new brick and mortars. And then we did hold another bond in 2022. This was for $665 million. We saw a slight uptick in voter approval to 71%. And again, because we saw more growth in different revenues, sales tax, our property tax base, we only needed 0.6 of a property increase to do this. And this is where you do see a slight shift from new schools to renovations. We did 5 new schools and 7 school renovations in that bond program.
So with that, where do we go next? Again, it's a great working relationship. It has provided lots of good information and guiding information for us to do our work. So a few months ago, we used our own OPL team to come in and do a strategic visioning session with us. And we came out of that not battered and bruised, but with a different mindset of how can we do things better? How can we focus our energies to clarify and refine the roles of the work that we do with the core team? So while that initial effort got us on the right track. Since that time, we've continued to meet and look at how we can do things better and differently, such as connecting the work that we do to the strategic plans and goals, which both elected bodies are putting into place with fidelity. We're also, with the opportunity as we transition more contracted FD&C staff back to in-house staff, we're going to take the opportunity to look at some different metrics to help us plan better as we move forward. We're close to completing that transition and maybe hope to do it within the next year. We're down to the last 2 positions. And then where do we go from here? So again, we meet on a monthly basis. In fact, Emily and I meet once a month otherwise, just to touch base and catch up on things. And we're trying to take a more holistic picture of the work that we do within the CIP and how it affects the facilities and schools in our district. So high on those lists are things like life cycle needs, which are ever present for us. We've got technology items that we should be looking at. We all know we have an effort to increase our safety and security at our schools. And the new one on this list would be the sustainability component. You know, most recently we had an initial conversation at a policy committee meeting about the stepping off point of where we go with sustainability. So we're looking at increasing that as well.
Do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
I know this was your slide. One of the things that really struck me when we did our little retreat, and I don't think we came out too battered and bruised, but we were all in there for about 4 hours, and we weren't going to leave until we had direction, until we agreed on direction to think about the documents that guide our work from month to month. So the document that you all approved, which is the MOU, right? It's a high arching agreement saying we're going to have this group. And then it's up to Mark and myself, our other subject matter experts, other leaders to think about how we get that work done. And really I know that you all have adopted a strategic plan previously. Our board just adopted a strategic plan, and I really thought we as a core team can do more to be intentional, to connect your strategic plan goals and our board's strategic plan goals as it relates to school facilities to the work that we do. So not just are we delivering a CIP to you all, but we want to start connecting those dots. And I think the other thing that we've thought about and talked about is leveraging the core team and particularly the county's relationships with the municipalities. So how do we maximize the efficiency of the resources by connecting to municipalities so that there's more equity across the district in the school buildings that are built. There's equity in the facilities that are maintained. Because while it is so important that we build new schools where they are needed, the schools that are still sitting there, we want to make sure that those children feel like they're in the best possible learning environment also. So just sort of like a personal pledge from myself is that that is something I really want you all to see in the next few years come out of the core team. And I get the very last slide. So we do recommend another 5-year renewal or continuation of the interlocal agreement. We made some minimal changes to the current version. I think Rod worked with our attorney. We took a little bit of language out. We added a little bit of language in, but overarching, it is still the same document. Our board did approve this yesterday at their commissioners meeting. As you know, Susan Evans, who used to be on this board, she continues to be a big proponent of this working group and sees really the fruits of it. As Mark mentioned, we are working on sort of these supporting documents. We do want to come back and share those with you all, just so that, if we're off course anywhere, you all know it or you can see it. But we think we've got the beginnings of a really good updated document that will guide our work.
And with that, any questions, comments?
All right, board members, you've heard the presentation. I've got thoughts. I don't know how many of them I'm going to put into words. Ms. Evans.
Thank you so much. Sold.
Yeah.
I was around for those contentious relationships between several a board of commissioners ago and boards of education ago. Attended the joint meetings between the two groups. and it was very palpable. So this has been, tremendous. I can't believe it's been 10 years. But yeah, and I think it's a model, what you've set up.
Only me. Dr. Taylor was like, who was here? I was like, just me.
What you've set up, so I wasn't here.
That's what he asked.
I was over there. Right. And was seated, observing those meetings. But what you've set up is really a model for other districts, so they, if they choose to follow suit. But also, what I love about this is having the MOU and setting it up in this way, establishes it in a way that no matter who the staff are, they've got these guiding principles, and you've just set the tone of how the boards should work together regardless of who's in these seats or who's in your seats. So thank you so much.
If I may, I would kind of rephrase that. It doesn't force us to work together. It allows us to work together. That framework is very positive for us in the work that we do.
That's right.
So, of course, dittoing Lynn in every area of the word, and even to what you just said, the allowing piece. But we're glad that where you are now is that it's allowed when we were in a very difficult place to have people at the table who actually want to work together to do what's best for students. And that's the thing that I want to just give praise and highlight. And I may not have, I don't know, I didn't see, will we see the MOU revision at some point?
Yeah, it'll come up as a vote, and there'll be the documentation there. We can get that to you.
Okay, I didn't see it, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. There was a lot because it's the end of June.
Yeah. Right.
Ms. Mahaffey.
I'm grateful that this, from really something that came out of discord and disagreement, has come to this thing that I've heard, board members when I first came on praise it, see the value in it. You see, news stories of different, and it seems easy compared to having projects and the trauma that some people lived through with that. And, I see that also highlighted in our relationship with the commissioners. I remember when Ms. Johnson-Hostler was chair, we went on a bus tour of some of those facilities that benefited from this whole process. And so just thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. And thanks for bringing up the bus tour, because, that is something that I know there's a lot of work that goes in from the core team to build the plan, but then also we take it out to the community to help sell the plan. And sometimes just those visual representations of some of the renovation needs or some of the school crowding needs can just be really effective in building that public support. So I thought that was a great program, and give kudos to our former chair for that.
Thank you. As someone who had not seen all of our schools, that bus tour was also extremely helpful to me. At the time, I lived in a district that actually I was just with the commissioner this morning talking about when he came on in 2014, I came on in 2013. Our southeastern corner of the county had not really been touched. And so just the growth that we've seen just over the last few years has been tremendous. I also think for me, and I think Mr. Strickland said it best, I think the biggest gift that it gives me as a board member is that our leadership team from both finances and facilities and student assignment, which Mr. Gross has been engaged, is really helpful, because as a board member, I come to this from a place of governance, and we are allowed to be a governing board because you all are doing the work that staff really should be doing, that you're actually working out all the kinks to our building program, including the 7-year rolling plan, and then our job is really governance. And so I think that's what I'm most grateful for, is 1 year into the board, we were actually able to move towards governance and not have the board engaged in what it really means to have a building program, because we were engaged in that my first, actually almost 2 years on the board. The first year we were still working out the kinks. So I think that's also, for me, most important to say, is it allows boards to govern, which is ultimately our responsibility, and the staff to do the day-to-day work.
And Ms. Lucas, I appreciate you bringing up the alignment with the strategic plans. because this is one of those areas where, we'll speak to the governance issue, we'll adopt policy and then seeing how a sustainability policy might impact the cost assumptions, right? What is the cost per square foot going to be in using one HVAC system versus another? Things like that come up in our facilities committee. So I'm glad you all take all of that into consideration and are able to bring back good solid numbers for us today.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or any other comments? Dr. Taylor?
And I'll just, and I think the board has stated this, but I know you guys realize how valuable this process is. And I think one of the things I discovered working at the department is how this does not happen in most communities, where we've seen commissioners be voted on and vote down a project or funding that the board and the previous commissioners had done. And so what I like about this process is that it doesn't matter who sits in these seats, that the process takes place here. They look at all of those critical things so that there's no way that the contention comes in when somebody new comes in. And so I'm just surprised that we haven't been asked to present this at the national level, because this is a model that I was really not familiar with. It was really about going to commissioners with your hands out and having that contention back and forth as to whether or not you're going to do it. So we absolutely appreciate this process and the people that are involved in it. And I just know you guys know how valuable it is.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. All right. Well, Ms. Lucas, thank you very much, Mr. Strickland. And we will turn to our next agenda item. So next we'll be talking about the Wake Young Men's and Young Women's Leadership Academies, potential university partners, and any updates that I know situations are evolving minute by minute. So we look for the latest, and we're going to put all of that pressure on Mr. Cedric Williams.
No pressure. No pressure. No pressure.
We just govern over here.
Well, thank you, Board Chair, Vice Chair Johnson Hossa. Good to see everybody this afternoon. My good friend Paul Domenico is coming along as well to support and help. But we do have a presentation we want to put before you. And today is just really updates. And with the presentation, what we want you to know, first of all, is that we have put a thought exchange out there to get information from our families to know what they want in the next partner or university or college that we end up partnering with. We thought that was important from the get-go before recommendations and decisions and all that was made. So you're going to hear a bit about what they're asking in just a moment. Also, with the thought exchange, I do want you to know that a total of like 131 participants have taken part. And we just didn't do this with our juniors and seniors. We went ahead and sent this to families, even at the middle school level, because one day their children will come up to be teenagers and be a part of the high school and the early college experience. So also with that, we had 91 thoughts with over 2,221 ratings that were put in as well. So glad to know that individuals are looking at each other's thoughts, questions that are there, and making sure that they are rating them. So you see that on the slide, it has 2,127. So as I was sitting there, I saw that we have a few more. So that's why I said 2,221 as of today. So that's where we are as far as the thought exchange. Just as many of you know, there's a Senate bill out there right now that you can't see under the table, but toes are crossed and fingers are crossed, that will be voted on and approved by the Senate. And if it's okay, Dr. Taylor, I'll just mention that we did talk to Senator Blue's office about an hour ago. They asked a few questions because as early as possibly Thursday, they're hoping to have a vote. And I'm keep your fingers crossed as well with that. That would mean a lot and for so many different people.
So to that, I added that I do believe we now understand that the committee meeting 2 o'clock tomorrow.
2 o'clock tomorrow, there is a committee meeting to hear more about the bill. I know that I'll be present. Dr. Taylor has cleared his schedule because this is important to him to make sure that he's there as well. I'm sure he'll talk to many of you as far as if you would like to attend, but I think just that presence and the show of support for this bill will go a long way.
And what I'll add to that is that I think the General Assembly sees the nature of what this kind of legislation can do. This bill passed unanimously in the House, 105 to 0. I don't know how often that happens. I'm sure there's stuff that goes through with that kind of number. But also, we know the things that are being discussed in the General Assembly now and some of the blockage that is there. And so this is one of the few bills that I understand that the Senate may even be addressing. So that speaks volumes to me about this being about children and everybody recognizing that. So we're going to, again, keep our fingers crossed, hope that we get the vote that we need. But we feel very good about it. And I think it speaks volumes about how this really supports what children need and not about anything else.
And a great point, and each representative we talked to said, well, this is about kids, right? And so I think that's why it just passed unanimously, okay? So I do want to move forward to talk to you a bit about the universities and community college that you see before you on the screen. No particular, well, alphabetical order, actually. As you can see, we had North Carolina State University, North Carolina Wesleyan. You would say, well, wait, they're not even local. But they do have a satellite location. They wanted to talk with us, so we did sit down to talk with them. Shaw University as well, Tech, and then also William Peace University, were all the universities that we actually sat down at the table to talk with. We did have dialogue with Meredith, but not on the same level as these particular universities for one reason or another, okay? Now, what I want you to know and understand about these particular universities, that each university, like either president or vice president, actually sat and talked with us. And I thought that was big in the fact that that's a show of importance for them to listen and to hear what we had to say about things. I want to make sure I point out that, for instance, William Peace University, we sat with them on multiple occasions. They wanted to try to make things work, but there's just a space issue at William Peace University. And I think you've probably heard that before. And so as far as trying to make things work there, it's just not going to happen because of the space issue. Okay? Also, North Carolina Wesleyan, same type situation. It's a satellite location. We needed something larger as far as that is concerned. So at this point, I want to go to the next slide and just talk to you about some contributing factors as we continue to move and eventually narrow things down to a particular decision. Some of our, as I mentioned, university officials are concerned about the number of students that we could possibly have on campus with updates to the CIH, that's the Cooperative Innovation High School Grant or Program. Also, space on some campuses is just an issue. Questions regarding the possibility of 13 and 14-year-old students taking class on campus. Some of our university officials have said, that's tough, right? And not saying it's a no-go, but just kind of question that. A large number of families wanted to maintain a partnership with a four-year university, and that was big. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Proximity to campus from the various homes our students reside is another decision-making factor. Last but not least on this list is proximity to the Women's and Wake Young Men's Leadership Academy. We looked at that as a contributing factor as well. I want to go back to the thought exchange just for a minute to mention like the top 5 or 6 areas that everybody uses. I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people use AI nowadays, right? So as we look at the thought exchange, some of the top themes that come up from families include this. They want to make sure that there's transferable credits that take place, and that makes sense. That was top on the list. Stability is also something that's top on the list. Third on the list was 4-year university, quality of education, and then course selection, meaning will they have a variety and be able to take something and not just a certain path. So all of those particular areas are important. So I'll come back to this again to show you this, that right now as a staff, we're definitely looking at North Carolina State University, and we're looking at Shaw University as viable options at this point in time, especially looking at what our thought exchange is saying and what the university officials have talked with us about. So at this point, I'll just stop and pause to see what questions you may have that I may be able to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I know that use an expression we've heard in the last few years. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to build the airplane while you're flying it. And I know we've had pending legislation about this as we've tried to navigate state law, DPI regulations about what the new school might look like, different than what that environment was when the school was created.
Right.
So where do you think we will end up with the issue of 13 and 14-year-olds? Right now we know we have that middle school component. We've heard some versions that have said maybe it would only be limited to a high school. Are we at the point where we think we can keep it a middle school?
So I'll chime in on that. We know this is going to be an opportunity to really remake what we have, because what the department has said in terms of what the legislation requires now, kind of what's in the bill, is going to require that it be 9-12. And so we know that's going to be absolutely a part of it. That doesn't necessarily mean that logistically it has to be that way, because you can have the 9-12 innovative high school, but kids can still remain in the middle school portion of the building, take classes that perhaps would be online their freshman year. Most early colleges, that first initial course is some kind of university course. And so what we want to do is to make sure that once we identify who that partner is, what that final application of legislation looks like, if nothing changes with that, then we're going to be able to build that model that doesn't necessarily impact the space and the age of students that may go to that campus. And so that, I think you hit it on the head. That's the plane that we're building as we fly. And we know that DPI is still heavily involved in what the legislation is now. And so what this bill simply does is allow us to go out and find a new partner that keep the funding in place. But those new mandates that are now in place since the academies were established is something that we're going to have to adhere to. So that's what we know we have to build as we fly. So that is, I think, the right question to ask. And at the end of the day, we are going to look somewhat different than what we are now, because that is the legislation that's in place. But we want to be able to do it in a way that's going to benefit both the university, the district, and the
All right, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Questions for Mr. Williams or Dr. Taylor? Ms. Mahaffey?
First of all, thank you for all of your work on this, because it was, I'm going to say unexpected that this would be something that we would be talking about, and just a huge thanks to those families as they wait in anticipation. It's not easy. And so my question is, and with this upcoming school year, and I know there's a lot of unknowns, and so if you don't know, then we just don't know yet. But Wake Tech has offered to kind of stand in the gap for this coming academic year, and a huge thank you to Dr. Rawls and Wake Tech for doing that. does this pending legislation impact this coming academic year as far as that partnership with Wake Tech? Or is it for the following academic year?
Great question.
Or we don't know?
I've stayed on message with what I've seen.
Well, and I'm kind of side-eyeing, you're the boss over here.
We have planned
Not
to be
side-eyeing,
with
looking at it.
Wake Tech for the 24-25 school year. And to do as much planning with our new partner for the 25-26 school year. I'm sure Dr. Taylor may want to sit down at some point in time, and as this bill passes, and I'm optimistic that it will, if there are some things that we need to take a look at, we'll take a look at them then, but Wake Tech has really provided a heavy lift to make sure that all our students were accounted for and taken care of for this coming year, and so just trying to stay true in getting them what they need as they've given us what we've needed to get this year started. So, great question.
So I'll add to that, because I know this is probably some of the things that have come to board members, that if this legislation gives us the opportunity to do a school this year, then hey, what are we waiting on? And I think the biggest part of that is what we know that it takes for a school to lift up all the resources in order to do that. And Wake Tech has gone out on a tremendous limb to create that opportunity for us. And so I actually had a parent to say that I understand that, but is there even the possibility to look at the spring and be able to go somewhere? And so those possibilities with this legislation would certainly be there. But when I think about what it takes to even lift that up, the tremendous lengths that Wake Tech have gone through to even support us in the 11th hour. I can honestly say I don't know what would cause me to come to the board and parents and say that we're going to make a shift in midstream simply because we have the opportunity. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so we know that we have to be very careful about how we approach any of this. It is why we took so much time to deal with the decision of leaving St. Augustine's University versus staying, because there were a whole bunch of things that could have gone in any direction. And so what I would end by saying is that you can certainly do that, but I think it would put students...
Well, I'm not suggesting anything.
But it is, a tremendous amount of work to even do that. And even when we were looking at other possibilities for this fall semester, the one thing that we knew is that colleges and universities build those schedules and hire people way in advance. And so even to ask Wake Tech to do that, it took a lot for them to be able to do that. And other universities and schools really weren't even in a position to do it because they'd already made those decisions. So ultimately, we will stay the course. I know that that may displease some parents, but we are talking about stability, and that's going to always be important to us. So, great question. Appreciate you asking.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. Then go to Ms. Rice.
Kudos again.
I'm sorry, Mr. Swanson, and then we'll go to Ms. Rice.
I too wanted to say thank you, not only to you, Mr. Williams, but to the great principals of those two institutions as well for standing in the gap as well in the face of the unknown. And so being that bridge for their students and keeping the morale high is great. And so that's all I want to say, thank you, and I look forward to what happens in the Senate and the coming school year, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rice.
Again, congratulations, great job with the work you've done so far. Just a simple question or thought, looking around, keeping in the consistency of what we began with the academies in the beginning around HBCU. With looking at Shaw in your conversations, did you still see the ability, did they have the ability for the possible capacity that you're looking at, and then diversity in classes and things that you were looking for in the process? I was just curious to how those conversations.
Yeah. When the boss look at you, it means he wants you to go ahead and chime in.
Nancy.
So absolutely. And what I can appreciate about what Shaw has said to us, from the president to the vice presidents to the team that they brought. They said we want to be transparent with all of you, including the board. So if you want to look at our accreditation information, it'll be there for you. If you want to look at our finances, we will be more than willing to share that with you. They feel as if they are on stable ground. They have the space. I said, we have several students coming. And it's like, well, we have the seats for them. So they felt good about what they have to offer and are a willing partner at this point in time. And at some point, I think the superintendent may ask something of you, because we've heard from them. So I think it may be wise for a committee of a few of you to also kind of come together and bring back something to the full body as far as what you're seeing and what you believe as far as where we may go with this. But Shaw, and they've also circled back to their board of trustees as well. So their board of trustees is on board as well.
Very good. That was the only question.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Just one last question, I guess, unless anyone has any more. I know that the families of all the students in the Leadership Academy, those that have applied to the Leadership Academy, everyone is looking to see the final resolution of this. Do you anticipate that the board may have to come back and take any expedited actions to make sure that we can guarantee a smooth transition to the opening of the year?
For opening for this year?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything that we have not anticipated. If everything with the legislation is where it needs to be, that resolves any calendar issues that may have been lingering, then there was still some question as to what we would have to adhere to. But the optimism continues to grow. And so I haven't recognized any issues. You all may have additional information. The only other thing that has to be resolved, and Paul, I will let you speak to the application piece, but the application is due in October. I want to say 1 October. I don't know the exact date, I know it's October. But we do have to submit a letter of intent, and we need to do that in July. So that is part of the reason that I want the chair to be able to identify the 2 or 3 board members that can sit down with administration, and then we take that look and then be able to come back and really advise the board on this is where we want to go with the person that we want to do with the letter of intent. So, Paul, if you want to share some about the application process, the letter of intent, and what that's going to require. That would be the only thing I see as that.
Sure, thank you. Definitely work. So the letter of intent, the process starts with you submitting that, and that's saying that you, as a school district and your institute of higher ed, have committed that they're going to work on this application together, and that's typically due. And the deadline actually just passed June 14, 15. We did email DPI, and they were gracious enough and gave us an extension on that because they knew that part of what we're going to apply for is dependent upon this bill, whether it passes or not. So we told them, waiting on the bill and then determining officially who that partner is going to be won't be done until that next July board meeting. So they said we could submit that right after that July 16th board meeting. So that was gracious, and we do thank DPI for that as well. So from there, then it is working with the college partner on the application, and that is due, I believe it's October 4th. So from there, we'll work out a number of logistics with them on what's in the application, what a student programs and courses workload will look like, what a 5-year plan looks like for the students in the high school portion, and we'll line out all those details. And then we'd probably come back with updates for the board sometime in September so that we could have a final application ready to submit by that October 4th deadline.
Okay. Great. Thank you all. All right.
And I'll end by saying that having to build the plane on the fly is something that you do not want to do, but things are really falling into place like we really didn't expect. And I think it's going to end up putting us in a knock on wood. That's right. And so, Mr. Chair, I'll lean to you to determine if the 2 or 3 board members that you'd like to work with administration, just to really go through all the information and data about what we see as the 2 top candidates, and then help us really get your insight about what we bring as that final recommendation. And I'll leave that up to the chair.
I appreciate that, and I'll take any interest indicated from board members. I do know, though, that Mr. Hershey will be very interested in working on that. And just want to thank him for the work that he's done with all the families so far throughout this whole process. He's really put in a lot of work, and we're all very appreciative. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Sir, I appreciate the time.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we'll turn to the last item that we have on our work session right now. This is a discussion regarding board meeting agendas. And we don't have a staff presentation, but we do have some documents in Assembly that I'd like to pull up and just sort of guide this discussion, see what everyone thinks of different ideas, and if there's any directions that we want to go. I'll give you an opportunity. What I'd like to do, actually, is point you to the second document. Thank you, Ms. Pulley. This is, if you look at Assembly, it's the one on the right. The file names get truncated, but this will be the one that is the sample agenda. That's it. So it will be the one over there that you would see on your right-hand side. So the genesis of this is, as some of you all know, different people have come to me over the course of the year with different questions or feedback about the board agenda. Suggestions for change, different ideas for how to restructure things. There's some things Mr. Malone and I have talked about in terms of just parliamentary procedure. And so rather than bring them up as a specific recommendation or anything one by one, I thought we could just have this general conversation going into the summer about any changes we might want to make as we come back for the new school year. So if you look at this sample agenda current format, this is an example of, I took this from last week's meeting. I added on, I think, student staff presentations to that. But just to give you an example of how the current meetings are ordered. If you go scroll down to the second page, you'll see sample agenda proposed format. So I wanted to talk about each of these individually, bring them up for discussion, and then open it up. The first thing, this was something that Mr. Malone and I had noted, was we were approving our meeting agenda after we've already been meeting, oftentimes for about an hour. It just sort of made more sense to keep things cleaner and to give everybody notice if they're watching, if they're attending the meeting, if an item is being changed on the agenda, to put that up at the beginning of the meeting. So the first item is relatively modest. It's just moving approval of the meeting agenda to the first thing we might do after the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't think it's that controversial. I think it's kind of common sense, but I wanted to get any thoughts, any buy-in, or if there was anything we might be missing about that one. Ms. Mahaffey.
My only thought is when we do have items, for example, the latest was the naming of the gym for Karen Cinders. Generally, that is kind of moved up to action for after the information, but that's the only one I can think of. But maybe we can just make that a practice.
I think as a practice, that's a good idea, because those situations do come up from time to time.
But otherwise, that's really literally the only one I can think of.
Did anyone else have any thoughts just about the approval of the meeting agenda and when we might do that? I mean, again, I thought it was kind of common sense, but I also knew, I might be missing something. So, Dr. A?
The only question I had was, in terms of for us to review, if there was something that we would wish to pull out of consent to action, is that something that we need to look at as well, if this is going to be moved up or
Well, this would actually be the best time to do that. during the approval of the meeting agenda. So if you wanted to move something from consent to action, you'll go ahead and do it early in the meeting. That could give, other, members maybe time to look at it who hadn't assumed that it might be on action. It gives the public and anybody else maybe just a little more notice, so it's not always just like the immediacy or the surprise of it. Yeah. Okay. So let's leave that one up there. The next item you'll see is, previously we would then go to the superintendent's comments, the board chair comments, board members, any staff or student presentations, approval of the public agenda, and then we would get to public comment. Now, we have 9 board members and we probably have 9 individual opinions as to what makes the perfect board comment in terms of board comment content or length or any of that. The way I see it oftentimes is this is our one opportunity as board members to share whatever it is that we think is important with the public that might be topical, but it may or may not have a specific spot on the agenda. So, board member comment is important. However, there are 9 of us. If we each took about 3 minutes, that would be half an hour. If we took 5 minutes, now we're getting to 45 minutes. Oftentimes, if we get to 10 minutes, now we're looking at 90 minutes of comment before we've gotten really into the meeting agenda. We know that we have students who attend the meetings. We'll have a lot of other people, working families that attend the meetings. And so the thought here that was brought up that I liked and I wanted to bring to you was moving the board comments after public comment. So we would have the opportunity for, you'll see on there, on agenda or priority public comments. These are the students. These are the folks right now. We ask people to sign up and indicate if they're speaking for an item that's on agenda or off agenda, to put them ahead and give them an opportunity for the students to address us first before launching into the board comments. And again, for the folks that have something to say about an item we'll be taking action on or we'll be voting on, to really put them at the front of the line and give them that opportunity, especially if, again, most of the folks that come to speak to us might be parents. It could be it's a school night. They might have children at home, dinner, homework, everything else. So it's a way to prioritize, to put those comments above board comments. And again, we can still have the superintendent, we can still have the staff and student presentations first when we bring the students in for a lot of the different celebrations that we have. But it's just a shift right there in allowing some people to come in. They've driven all the way to Cary if they don't live in Cary. It's a big county, come in, be able to provide their comment, and then if they're welcome to stay through the rest of the meeting, but if they have other conflicts or commitments, it lets them get through the meeting a little bit quicker. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments about moving that public comment ahead of the board comments? Mr. Swanson?
I'm definitely in favor of this. I wish we could do it tonight. Because I think it does make the most sense. I mean, I'm just thinking back to when Principal Perry's family was here and they had to sit at least an hour to an hour and a half before we could get to that one item. So making sure that we push that up. And it also gives the public an opportunity. If they have a short time constraint that they need to be in and be out, there's some consistency there. So I'm definitely in favor of this format thus far.
Okay, great. Dr. Ed?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that as well. The one question I have is if there were only a few people on agenda, could you move on to the off-agenda speakers in that time period?
I think so. And we'll talk more about that in this, the third change or shift about how to organize that. But that's what I would see. Oftentimes we've had some meetings where we've only had 5 or 6 folks, and we could get through everybody there before board comment. But it's when we do have a large crowd and we do want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak, that you would start with those on agenda and those student speakers first. Yeah. By practice, and we jump ahead a little bit to the policy, we have set it up to where, you know, we would set aside 30 minutes at the beginning, and then, you know, sort of depending on our agenda, at our discretion, we could then move on with the rest of the business calendar before jumping back. So, you know, under the previous policy, you know, we could hear everybody first, or if we knew we had a long line of speakers, but maybe we had priority items that we knew there were a lot of people in attendance that they wanted to see what the debate and what the discussion was. You know, we've done that where we've gone ahead and then gone to those important items first on the business agenda before returning to hear the remainder of public comment. But yeah, I don't anticipate that if we only had, say we had nobody speaking on agenda, that we would just skip that. I think we would still start with that comment first and try to get through as many as possible. Yeah. I know some of these are connected, so let me go ahead and jump into that third thing that we've talked about, the public comment on priority agenda and extended. So right now, state law requires public comment at our board meetings. And I'm going to empower Mr. Malone to jump in at any point to correct me if I misstate what the law is. But as I've seen it and I've reviewed it, I think we're required to only have public comment at one meeting and for at least 30 minutes. Is that?
I'm not sure that there's a 30-minute requirement. I just think it says at one meeting, at one regular meeting a month. But I'll pull that up real quick. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have to.
But there's not a minimum required.
Correct. There's not.
So we know from the history of the school system, you know, public comment and citizen advocacy is important. And so, you know, we have gone above and beyond in Wake County what a lot of other districts might do, where they might only have public comment once a month at one of their meetings. You know, I think our practice is we have it at all of our meetings except for the special meetings, the spotlight on students or things like that. And then again, you know, we try to provide, you know, sufficient time for those comments. What I'd asked Mr. Malone about and Mr. Ramey in putting something together was if there was something where we set aside the division between the priority and the off-topic, and then for some time frames on that. Now, these would be for 60 minutes of public comment, and that's completely flexible. And if I'd had more time, what I wanted to do was kind of go back and see kind of what our longest public comment period has been, and make sure that we had at least that amount of time set aside, or maybe that amount plus 50%, right? And then you'll see here that the idea is, of course, we could always extend that time so that if we had a lot of people coming out about a priority topic, we could always extend the time available past any limit. But if we have some sort of definite time, regardless of what it is, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, the idea would be that then if we had more speakers than we had time, you could still reduce the time, as we've seen some city councils and town councils do recently, maybe from 3 minutes to 2 minutes to allow everyone to speak. We've seen at a lot of local governments throughout Wake County, there have been there have been current issues that have drawn a lot of public speakers. But oftentimes, recently, we've seen these are speakers that are outside of the community, outside of the county, that are coming in and maybe are speaking to off-agenda items. And, you know, you'll have meetings progressing past midnight, and the citizens that have come to speak on matters before, like the town council or the city council, oftentimes don't get an opportunity or go home or give up. You know, they might have, in the municipal cases, a zoning case, an ordinance case, maybe there's something regarding law enforcement that they came out to speak on, but they'll get caught behind whatever this big turnout is from outside of the community. So trying to come up with some way to, again, prioritize those on-agenda items, and then have some limit onto how long the meeting could be, was sort of the idea the idea here. And I know we don't want to limit speech, and we don't want to limit the content of speech. But the idea is, in terms of like how long our whole meeting could last, is there any interest in the idea of a cap on just how long total public comment could last? And so I know, just talking to some of you individually, we have a lot of different thoughts on it. So I just wanted to open up for discussion and see where we landed. Mr. Malone.
Can I just say
Yeah.
two things real quick? So the statute does not provide any minimum amount of time. It just says that you'll make it available. And this particular draft doesn't have in it the ability, not that the board can do it, but the ability for the board to extend the period. What this one does is it allows the board to reduce the amount of time per speaker to keep it within the hour.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you couldn't vote to waive your policy and this, that, and the other if you wanted to, but as drafted, that option is not in this draft.
Okay, sorry. I know we talked about a
We
lot of
talked
different
about a
ideas
lot.
going
I know,
into it.
we talked about a lot
So
about this.
I'm not up to date on which particular draft, but, all right, thank you, Mr. Malone. Sorry, Ms.
Oh,
Evans.
that's okay. So I like having that clause in there that we could reduce it to 2 minutes or 1 minute. I am not in favor of a blanket reduction. I know what's been happening at Raleigh City Council. I have followed all that. We have not seen that in Wake County. I do recall a couple of meetings in the 2010 era where we had, it was either 60-something or 80-something. I can't remember. That's the longest public comment period that I remember. And there were meetings that went into 11 p.m., midnight, et cetera. But so I don't have a set number of speakers where I would say to pull that, to implement that, reduction of time. But I think it's rare. And I think at a minimum, as public officials, we owe the public an opportunity to speak. And I just think, despite what might be happening at another board's meeting, if it's not precedent here, then we need to not overreact.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts? Ms. Mahaffey?
So I'm still thinking about the time piece and that aspect of it, but I do appreciate there being the item X public comment extended if needed, just reserved. I know currently we have the ability to go into closed session, and then that when we come out would be when public comment would resume. I think having that before public comment makes people feel heard and not like because sometimes we can be back here for a while and it doesn't make it seem like we're not intentionally waiting people out, but it can feel that way if you're sitting in the audience. So to have that space reserved if needed, I think prior to closed session is, I appreciate that. Even if we keep our public comment the same where it's 30 minutes and then saving the rest for after action.
Appreciate that. Any other thoughts or opinions? I want to ask Ms. Evans some more questions about some direction, but before I do, just if anybody else has any other takes or thoughts, reactions, or other ideas we haven't considered up here. Mr. Swanson.
I agree with what's been said so far, and I do believe we're going to limit public comment, and I think we should lead by example. I think I've shared this with you, that if we're potentially cutting public comment from 3 to 2, then as board members, we should adhere by the same policy and make sure that our minutes are 2 minutes, because we can't get upset with the public for speaking over their 3-minute term if we have folks that may speak 5 minutes or 6 minutes or whatnot. So I think we have to model that behavior to get true buy-in. And so I also think that Mr. Hershey's email kind of summed up a lot of my thoughts as well. And I think that both the chairs, Ms. Mahaffey and you, have done a great job of really gazing where, what makes sense. And I think if it's, I won't say that because I don't want to jinx it, but I'll just leave it there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Dr. Ng, did you have any thoughts?
I like the idea of having the second piece of the public comment before closed session, for the very same reason. I think it makes the people feel like their viewpoints are worth listening to as well. And in terms of the time, the speech, the public comment, I think 3 minutes is sometimes already too short for some folks, So I hate to spring it up on them and say, oh, now you got 2 minutes. It's like they can't ever get their point across in 2 minutes. So I would not be in agreement with cutting it by on a regular basis. But if there's a need for it, that's something that we need to let people know ahead of time.
Okay. Let's go back just to first Ms. Mahaffey's point. The idea of doing the extended comment after the action items, but before closed session. Are we all? I mean, is that sort of like a consensus, or rather than waiting until after that?
Do you want a thumbs up?
Just sort of like a thumbs up on it. I think that makes sense for a lot of the reasons Ms. Mahaffey said. And again, we never know going into closed session how long that would last.
Right.
And just that indefinite period of time. We don't want to leave people in the dark that way.
Well, and it doesn't stop the chair from putting a pause on the meeting so people can take a rest, because sometimes it's a lot to take all that information in. We've done that in the past as well, where we take a 5-minute respite and then come back to the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then let's go to, I want to go back to Ms. Evans' comments. So, and I know Dr. Ng had a different view on that, I think, but like if we did have something where we reserve the right to reduce time, say, if we had 90 speakers one day, right? Is there any kind of, if we had a time limit, the idea that, okay, well, we've got 90 minutes set aside for public comment, we've got 90 speakers, it makes sense everyone would have a minute to make sure everyone can speak. But if we don't have the time limit, what would the criteria, is there anything like we could say in advance to let people know that we reserve the right after a certain number of speakers to reduce time? Or would it just be sort of at the discretion of the situation, or on this, basically the facts of an individual situation?
In my opinion, it's going to be, in the moment, because we don't get the list of speakers until we go in there and sit down right at 5:30. And I mean, you're putting me on the spot. If you want me to come up with a number,
No, I just didn't know if you
70.
had that. But
where in the moment, at the beginning of the meeting, you would say, because of the number of speakers, the chair would say, because of the number of speakers, we're going to reduce the time to 2 minutes. I really am opposed to 1 minute.
Yeah.
You can't hardly breathe, collect yourself, For many people, as we all know, public comment at any time, any place is really intimidating. And they've taken the time to think about what they want to say.
Absolutely.
And to try to go from 3 to 1, I just think is crazy. But 2 minutes, I think, is doable. Anyway, I think that's reasonable, it's doable, and I think you can do it in the moment without insulting people,
Okay.
I mean.
Mr. Swanson, then Mr. Rice, then Dr. Ng.
So I agree with Ms. Evans on that. And so I'm wondering if, to Ms. Evans' point, if we do have 100 speakers coming up, is there a way that we can, during the agenda, make a motion to implement the policy, read the policy, and then therefore we're following our procedures. We're also citing our policy, so it does not come as a surprise to folks. But this is actual board policy that we are adhering to.
I think so, and Mr. Mullins nodding.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And, where I've seen boards have to implement it, even when they go to a minute, because they've had a lot of speakers, people tend to say the same stuff over and over and over again. You know, you find a lot of that. So, you know, it's not as bad as it may appear.
Now, I think it was Ms. Rice and then Dr. Ng, and then we'll come back to that.
So, just being a participant in public speaking over the years, one, I'm not in favor for decreasing anyone's time. If the time is allotted, and that's what we say that we're giving people, and whether people are preparing and whether they've had the time to go back and determine whether or not we deem, or the board chair, whoever at the time, deems that we have enough people and looking at time. I see things a little differently. I know that we're talking about, it's, you know, being here. I think to Lynn's point earlier, Ms. Edmonds' point earlier, how often have we seen? We have not seen, and hopefully we will, for another crisis in our education system that we had those numerous years ago. I don't think that we've seen that level of engagement in over a decade. So I think that we're putting, you know, the horse before the court part kind of thing. But I'm not in favor for decreasing people's time, no matter how many people are here, because that's their time. And I say that from the perspective of being a public in person. I know because to me, it feels like I need you to move and hurry up because I don't want to be here. But you placed us to be here, and that's part of the job of being here. And it's not like we're here every Tuesday. You're only doing this twice a month. That's just my thought process with it. So no matter what the time is, this is the time that I've carved out to listen to citizens and to hear what they want to say. So I think we should do that. And basically, just breaking down the times and stuff makes sense. To me, I was just trying to be quiet to just hear everybody's thoughts and play them out. But I'm not in favor of decreasing people's time. I saw what that looked like even back then during that time. It's just that people prepare, like you said, for what they prepared for. And taking it down, I heard some people say, of course not 1 minute, but 3 minutes, as we say, is already at a minimum to try to get everything out that you're trying to say to people that sometimes, and I know we're probably forward thinking, sometimes people don't, who have been previous board members or whatever, may not respond to people's emails, so sometimes they can't come. And I just want to say this. Last board meeting, where one of our residents came and could not get anybody and any help, I couldn't imagine if we took away their time to express the need because they can't get people's attention. And sometimes the only time people can get our attention is through those 3-minute public comments. Give people their time so that they feel valued and feel heard. That's all I have to say.
And I appreciate that, and that's an important perspective here. I do want to make clear, though, that the intent isn't not to hear anyone. The intent is to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity, and we've seen meetings that have drug long, where we've got names on that public speaker list that when we call them, they've gone home. And we don't get to hear from them because of the length of the meeting, board member comments, the length of the agenda, the length of the discussion, length of other comments. And so we do get people that do give up and go home. And so, you know, the idea was there a way to get more people through, more people through the meeting? But I think those are very good points that you raised, and I think they're all valid. Ms. Mahaffey?
Piggybacking on what Ms. Rice has said, I think, right now our policy states 3 minutes or up to 3 minutes. I don't have it verbatim. 3 minutes or less, up to 3 minutes. I can only think of a couple of times where we had to implement I think we even did it for 45 minutes and then implemented that policy. But I'm curious with the proposed changes to the shift in agenda, if maybe that's enough.
Might be enough.
So that people don't go home, and maybe we keep that, if we start to see that becoming an issue, then come and look at this policy again, but implement the changes that we all agree on right now and see kind of how things fall out with that.
What does everyone think about Ms. Mahavi's proposal that, again, we do the adoption of the agenda at the beginning, we do give the priority speakers on the on-agenda topics and the student speakers, we move them to the front before the board comments, and we do separate the on-topic and off-topic to try to give the priority to people that are speaking on something we could be voting on, and then see how that works?
Yeah, I think people should be able to speak, period, before we even speak. And I'm to Mr. Swanson's point around, and someone even made comments prior, I think even our comments need to be tailored to a certain amount of time. I actually went back and checked to look at our time that we speak, and it's, well over, I watched all board members, it's well over 3 to 5 minutes for each person that did speak. So I think that his comments were spot on, that we all should be cohesive around that particular thought.
And I think that's something we can do by practice, right, by culture, as opposed to like putting it in a policy. But I think if we're all aware of that, that we've got our time, but we also want to be respectful of everyone else's time as well. Real quick before I come back, did Dr. Green or Mr. Swanson?
I just remember when I've had opportunities to speak in front of the General Assembly and they would give me all of a sudden give me oh, now you got 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes, and it makes me have to sit and look at what I want to say and modify it, and it takes time for me to think through what I need to modify. So in the sense, I'm thinking for the on-agenda speakers, if they have a promised 3 minutes, but on the subsequent section, if there are just a lot of people in that group, maybe we can give them a heads up, say for the subsequent public comment section, we will cut it down to 2 minutes. Give them a heads up so that people can make modification during the time that we're speaking, during the action items, a little bit of time to kind of make modification.
Yeah.
So,
I also like changing the word. I never liked off-topic. So maybe subsequent is the word. I'm like, I like that better. It sounds less offensive.
But off-topic versus off-agenda, or still just...
I was sharing that feedback every single time.
Okay.
I think they're over it because we wouldn't change it. I don't feel the need to say anything because I personally believe that we are a public body and our job is to listen to the public body under any circumstances. 5 hours or 2 hours.
Yep.
Mr. Swanson?
I also think to folks who this may be their first meeting, they're saying you are speaking off topic, to them it seems a little disrespectful that we're saying that the issue that they're coming to this board to speak about is not on our agenda, but it's on their agenda. So I think let's be mindful of that language.
Okay, but let's now, I just want to make sure that we're not, I thought we were sort of coming to a consensus about dividing up the comment.
I was just laying it out there. I'm not going 10 toes out on it. I'm just throwing it out there from what I've heard before.
Yeah.
But again, this is a board. We vote how we want. I'm just throwing it out there.
I apologize. I just wanted to be clear because I was misunderstanding if we were walking back from the idea
No, I was
of
just
dividing it.
following up with Dr. Eames' piece to see how, because I feel like it coincides with what we've heard.
Okay, I just needed some clarification. I apologize. Mr. Mahaffey, or sorry, Ms. Mahaffey.
Sure. So I just want to say, with public comment, we have prioritized our students first. That was a change that we made. Having things that are on the agenda be the priority, and then things that are not on the agenda come. And again, for me, I'm not advocating that we have a consistent split between those two public comment periods. I just like the idea of having that extended if needed listed, which can easily be something, we've gone through our public comment, if it ends up being just to have that time reserved. And so again, I'm advocating for having that time reserved so it's a visual to folks, but also not to say, okay, we had no students, one person who spoke on agenda, we're going to go through everything and then we'll come back to the other people while they wait. So that's really what I'm trying to articulate.
Okay. No, and I think that's good. I think it sounds like we're coming to some consensus on it, that there won't be any limits on time dedicated to public comment, but that we can divide them up, and that we will put public comment before board comment. And that when we do have the extended comment will come after the action items, but would come before closed session. Does that sound? Do we have any other thoughts or things that we'd like to see, or do we just want to do a thumbs up on that? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Go ahead, Mr. Swanson.
I'm definitely in agreement. I just had one more piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since we're on public comment, I think also if there's a way as folks sign up, that, if they choose to spell their name phonetically, because oftentimes I think folks want their names to be pronounced correctly, and we want to learn how to pronounce their names correctly. So if we could, on our sign-up sheet, have that as an option, so we're not hearing the incorrect name and folks don't have to take away from their time to correct their name. So that's just...
Ms. Lee, do you want to comment on that?
Yes. So when we find something that that's not familiar, we will, Sarah will find the person, we will try to get a phonetic spelling. But I definitely think we can add that to the form. That actually can make our job easier.
Okay. Well, if that's sort of where we're ending up as a thumbs up, then those are changes we can look to make on our agenda. I'll work with Melissa as we craft our future agendas, and we'll make these shifts and see how it works. And if it, a couple months in, it looks like this isn't working out, or you want to go back to the old way, we can pivot back. Absolutely. I have a question for Mr. Malone, but then, as I say, Mr. Malone, do we need a policy change for the changes that we've talked about, just shifting where the comments are coming in, or dividing up the on-agenda, off-agenda, if we don't actually put the time limit in? Or
So I don't think so. When we looked at the policy on your agenda, it was not specific of any order, is my memory. And the changes that you've discussed here, if you were to approve the revised policy, where you place them on the agenda, I don't think would be an issue. I might want to look at that one again just for a second. Yeah, it says the business agenda. That has historically been after closed session, but you can...
So we might...
you may want to, instead of conclusion of the business agenda, we may want to say after the action, I don't know, maybe prior to closed session, or I don't know, we can figure out the right wording.
Before the conclusion of the board's business agenda.
Yeah, something like that, just to give it a little flexibility. But yes, I don't think we need any other policy changes other than to this policy.
Okay, and what about that second red line in paragraph 2? Do we need that language about
Not our policy.
that we called in priority?
Yes, I think you still want that, because if you were to, what I read that to say is that if you don't reach someone in the first one, you will continue with the priority in the second.
Okay.
In the second public comment, wherever you left off. So if by chance you didn't cover all the students or all the on agenda people during the first one, if you didn't, then you would pick up there with the second one, is the way I read that.
Okay. Ms. Emmons, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, my question was, is this it? Does this have to be an action item, or do you just alter the agenda for our next meeting and it's done? That was my question. Do we have to vote on it?
Well, I think you need to vote on the policy
Right.
change, but the agenda piece, especially if we tweak the policy a little, I think will cover itself.
Ms. Mahaffey?
So in policy 2340, parliamentary procedures, section A, it does say order of business.
Oh, it doesn't.
And so that does talk about A, call of order and determination of quorum, B, pledge of allegiance, C, comments by board superintendent, discussion, D, discussion and approval of agenda, E, public comments. So we may need to look at that, but it's not in this policy. It's in 2340 parliamentary procedures, and I'll forward that to everybody.
So
I
that
looked
does
under
sound-
2330 board meeting agenda. and did not
I
see
know.
So it sounds like even to make
I was like, wait a
some of
minute.
those modest changes, we would need an actual change of policy and a vote. Is that something we would like to bring back to policy committee, or is that something we want to just bring as an action item to the board?
I think since we have a majority of us here, I think we can, Rod's nodding,
it. Yes.
skip policy.
Okay, and that's from our policy chair and vice chair?
That's fine.
All right.
So
All right.
2340 parliamentary procedure, and then obviously the public comment one.
Okay.
And I mean, my memory is that I looked at that policy because we had that discussion and concluded that the policy did not require it to go to policy committee.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're fine.
Okay, that's right, because we did talk about that in terms of like timing or
Correct.
how long it could take to implement the changes.
I did miss 2340 though.
It's okay, I got it.
All right. Well, and the thought is that anytime if we're doing something in the meeting, with the meeting agenda, with how we run the meeting, and you have feedback, bring it to me. We can have this kind of discussion. Sometimes, like, if we look at something in isolation, it might sound like a good idea, kind of based on one scenario, but then when we hear other perspectives, we sort of see, well, maybe there's a good reason why we do it a certain way. So, all right. Any last thoughts on this, or otherwise I'm going to entrust our staff to work up an action item based on this discussion that we can bring to our July meeting. Not in work session. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our work session agenda. We do have some additional time. I don't know if anyone wants to go into closed session for any of the administrative items.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Swanson, a second from Dr. Ing, that will move into closed session for the statutory reasons citing in the meeting agenda for the regular meeting. All in favor of moving into closed session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move into closed session. We'll give the room a minute to clear. Thank you, everyone.